Welcome to the second episode of the Open Source Yoga interview series. My name is Lizzie Lasater, speaking from Munich, Germany. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Beryl Bender Birch, who joins us from, where are you?
Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is in the southwest corner of Massachusetts and the opposite end of the state from Boston.
So Beryl is the founder and director of the Hard and Soft Yoga Institute, a school for training teachers founded in 1980. She is the best-selling author of several books on yoga, including Power Yoga, and most recently Yoga for Warriors, which is basic training in strength, resilience, and peace of mind. And it's really a book about yoga for veterans. And she's also the co-founder of the Give Back Yoga Foundation. So welcome, Beryl. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good, Lizzie. You got that all right. That's great. It's wonderful to be talking to you, and what a treat. It's great that we can connect so easily over the miles.
Magic. So as you know, the Open Source Yoga interview series was born out of an idea to talk to teachers very frankly and honestly about their home practice. So what I want to do today is focus in on your story of practice. And my first question is really, when and where was your first yoga class?
1971, Los Angeles, Melrose Boulevard with Yogi Bhajan, and it was a Kundalini class. And there had been a poster hanging up on a brick wall on the UCLA campus, and I had been on my way to a lecture with Baba Ram Dass, who at that time was still called Baba Ram Dass. And I tripped up these steps, sat down to compose myself, and looked up, and there was this poster, hanging on the side of the wall there, and it said, yoga classes starting next Tuesday, 6 p.m., and I thought, well, that's cool. I should go, and I've always wanted to check out yoga, because I'd already been doing meditation, and so I signed up, and I remember Gurmukh and I, who is a wonderful Kundalini teacher that many people know, and I have talked about, probably we were in the same class back then, and the thing I remember most is that all his devotees at the time were in the next room making him his dinner, and so these smells of Indian cooking and all the Indian spices were wafting through the room as we did violent cat and cow and heavy fire breathing.
That's a great story. Were you an undergraduate at the time?
I was not a student at UCLA. I'd already graduated from college and done a couple years. I was a graduate student at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for 2 years in New York City. And I got tired of New York and decided I wanted to move to the country. So I moved to Los Angeles.
So can you talk a little bit more, if you can remember, about that first class? You said violent cat and cow. I mean, how would it compare to sort of what we would think of today as a flow, an asana flow class or something? What was the aesthetic of it? What were the mats like? What was the energy like in the room?
First of all, I should take back the word violent, because it wasn't violent. It was fiery. It was, all I remember is doing cat and cow and cat and cow and breathing. I have no idea if there were mats, how many people were in them. I remember Yogi Bhajan. He's very flamboyant and very funny and very new in this country. It was 71, and I was not inspired at the time to become a devotee. That didn't feel like the right path for me. So I do remember that I completed the course, which was probably 6 or 8 weeks or something, but I wasn't particularly taken with asana at that time, and I made absolutely no connection between asana and the meditation that I was doing. I was studying meditation with Choyam Trungpa Rinpoche in the Buddhist tradition, and my the man who eventually became my guru, Muni Sri Chitrabhanu, was a Jain monk who was just recently arrived in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I started studying classical yoga in like 1980 that I suddenly realized that relationship between, oh, asana is designed to lead you into meditation. I started at the wrong end here.
It's like the mind-body connection.
Exactly.
So, okay, so then it's sort of in the 80s. When do you start practicing on your own? When do you make the connection to start practicing at home?
Well, if by practice you mean doing asana.
I do. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, my practice at that time was a regular meditation class and regular meditation practice at home, and I've been doing that regularly since 71. I take a much more broad interpretation of the word practice, as you know, and many of our listeners and viewers know that the Sanskrit word for practice is abhyasa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's classically translated as making an effort to keep your mind steady, to stay focused on whatever it is you're doing. One of the Buddhist translations of the Yoga Sutra says, the effort to be there. Mm. And I always ask, well, the effort to be where? Well, it's the effort to be here in this moment. So if we think of practice as effort towards steadiness of mind, then when can we practice? We can practice all the time. So I like to say that I haven't missed a day of practice since 1971, but it doesn't mean that I'm doing asana every day. Mm-hmm. I wasn't and still am not given to be a natural hatha yogi. I'm much more inclined toward jnana yoga, or the path to God or self-realization through study and through knowledge, and the path through service, the path through work. I have just traditionally, ever since I started doing Ashtanga practice in 1980, always gone to the yoga shala to do my asana practice. So my home practice has always been at the yoga school in terms of asana. I do pranayama at home, I do asana, I do meditation at home, I do service everywhere in the world, but I very rarely do asana at home. I just bought a new house. I'm moving in about 3 weeks, and so I will have a yoga room, an asana room in there. We'll see. Maybe that can change, but I'm one of those people that needs the sangha, that needs the community, and I think I'm sort of following in the Pattabhi Jois and Krishnamacharya and Iyengar tradition, where it was commonly thought that the asana practices were never meant to be done alone. They were meant to be done with your teacher at the yoga shala or the yoga school.
I love
which
that.
has always been the tradition in India.
Yeah, I love that. I love your broadening the definition of practice and seeing it everywhere that you are. That's really beautiful. So, tell me about your first trip to India, and how did you find Ashtanga yoga specifically? How did you find Pattabhi?
Oh, what good questions. So much fun. My first trip to India was in 1974.
Okay.
And it's funny, at that time, I thought I was the last one on the train. I thought anybody who's anybody's already been to India. Andy Weil has already been. Paul Brunton had already written his fabulous book, In Search of Secret India. The Beatles had been, and Come and Gone, and Mia Farrow, and all these people had been to India. And I thought, oh, God, I'm so slow. I wish I'd been here sooner. Houston Smith had been to India. And I had spent the early 70s in Los Angeles, in California. And at the time, to be in California in the 70s, that was the epicenter of the human potential movement. Mm-hmm. Everybody was trying everything. And so when I went to India with my teacher, Muni Sri Chitrabhanu, I was a guest of a Jain meditation center called the Jain International Meditation Center. Actually, I have it backwards. Jain Meditation International Center. And I spent about 6 months in India. I traveled all in North India. I wasn't there to do asana. I spent about a month with Jain nuns and monks observing silence. I traveled up to Srinagar and spent time in the northern part of India, going to little mountain towns in the Himalayas like Manali. I spent about a month in Manali. Oh my God, it was the most incredible time. India was pretty safe then. I traveled alone.
Wow.
And I was almost kidnapped. In Bombay, I got drugged. I write about this in my first book. I write about it both in my first two books, Power Yoga and Beyond Power Yoga. I was so naive and so blissed out on God, that I was like, anybody that wanted to talk about the socioeconomic aspects of the relationship between India and the United States, and I just got sucked right in. I ended up getting drugged in a little tea stall by these two guys that seemed like university students. And I was sitting at this is a short story, I'll tell you quick. I was sitting at a table in this little tea stall, and they insisted that I get this green-looking smoothie, and I wanted chai, and they said, no, you get this. I go, no, I want chai. And I'm sitting there and we're talking, and all of a sudden I'm looking at this poster of Ganesha, kind of like the paintings behind you, right? And all of a sudden it starts melting down the wall, and I'm like going. And I started getting very lightheaded and starting to hallucinate. And I hear this voice, as if it came over the loudspeaker, and it says, "Get out of here now." And I stood up. The chair behind me tipped over. It was one of the funky little fluorescent lighted, small little tea stalls with those old chrome tables and the linoleum kind of tablecloths. And I just stood up and in the middle of the conversation and just walked out. And there was a taxi that was just going by the door. And I reached out, opened the door, got in the taxi, and I said, "Take me to Valkeshwar Road." And as the taxi's pulling away, I see this hand reaching for the door on the cab, and the taxi moves and the hand misses the door, and I'm out of there. And who knows? I don't think I'd be here talking to you right now if I hadn't escaped that very close encounter. But it taught me to pay attention a little better.
Yeah, that's a scary story. I mean, I think that's what I wanted to ask is sort of how has your practice, I mean, not just what has your practice taught you over the years, because that's a huge question, but how have you reincorporated what you've learned through your practice in order to change your asana practice? I mean, if we could look at a film of your asana practice 30 years ago and a film of your asana practice this morning, not just the physical changes through aging, but what is your attitudinal changes and your emotional changes in terms of your relationship with your asana practice?
That's really an insightful question, and it really shows, that you have a good understanding of impermanence and that everything changes. We're always surprised. Right. And just talking about asana practice, we're always sort of surprised when our asana practice changes because we think we're always going to be able to do what we can do. Though I can answer just briefly that question about what has your practice taught you, and all my practices have taught me to pay attention, to be more conscious, to work to be here, to be present, because really, what's the option? The only place we can ever really be is here. And the other thing I think our practices teach us is to learn to be with what is. Yeah. Because you can't argue with reality. I mean, you can. Try. But you're not going to win that argument, And so it doesn't mean that you lie down and let the world run over you and that whatever is going on is okay. It means in this moment, there's a lot of painful things going on. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of animals being abused. I don't even want to go into all the suffering that's probably happening right now. And if I focused on that, I'd be paralyzed. I couldn't do anything, So you do what you can with what you've got in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, as you think about what does your practice teach you? It teaches you that, all right, I'm going to accept in this moment that I'm stuck in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't accept it and start thrashing around, I'll get more deeply stuck in the mud. But in the next moment, I can develop right action. I can develop what is the right action. How do I know what right action is going to be in order to get me out of the mud, or to change this situation, or to get SeaWorld to release the orcas, or, what is the appropriate course of action? And I think our practices teach us that, our ability to know what is the right action in any moment comes, as the Buddhists say, out of skillful means.
Mm-hmm.
And skillful means comes out of practice. And so I think, if anything, I have learned the importance, as the Yoga Sutra tells us, practice becomes firmly grounded when it's done for a long time, without a break, and with earnestness, with passion. I've really seen my passion for this moment and for my life, and just be driven by gratitude and appreciation. And as your passion grows, your passion for yoga and your passion for practice and your passion to serve the world, you become more rewarded in a way. It's like the universe takes care of you. To be successful in anything, I think you have to be passionate about it. And that's something I learned from Steve Jobs, that you really need to be excited in the morning when you wake up about what you're doing. And I think our yoga practices help people to find their dharma, to find what it is in the world that they are meant to do, that no one else can do in the same way, and that they can be passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. And I like how you said it's about being okay with being in the mud, which is fundamentally an act of empathy towards yourself, to first accept this is where I am right now. And I love how you talk about that. That's really helpful.
What else? Something else you said is, how has my asana practice changed? In my, I guess it was my third book, Boomer Yoga, which I wrote for people in their 40s and 50s and 60s, I talk about our changing bodies, and how we are first in denial or angry or not really recognizing that our bodies are changing. I was struggling with some groin pain for years, and normally my yoga practice, my asana practice, fixed everything that was ever wrong with me. And so, and I had a pretty strong asana practice. But I was a runner for 20 years. I was a skier for 10 years. I played lacrosse in college. I was a dog musher for 10 years. And so, that my hips started wearing out, and I have very, very small bones. And when I went to an orthopedist to find out what was going on, she said, you're going to need a hip replacement in 10 years. And I went, me?
What?
I'm a yogi. I'm Beryl Bender Birch. I don't do hip replacements.
I'm floating right now.
And sure enough, I ended up with 2 hip replacements. And I don't run anymore, but I hike and walk and swim. I swim with the U.S. Master Swimming. And there's plenty to do, and I don't really miss what I did when I was in my 30s and 40s. I'm really grateful to be where I am and be healthy and be active and be agile and still working and still traveling and still writing.
So I'm curious. So I studied Ashtanga very seriously for 4 years with Mati Azrati at Yoga Works in Los Angeles. I was an undergraduate at UCLA, and my first day I said to my mother, I want to do some yoga. And she said, oh, just go see my friend Mati. And she didn't tell me what Ashtanga was or what anything was. I showed up at Mati's class completely clueless. But I fell in love with Mati, and then I went to her Mysore class for 4 years. And I was in my early 20s and it fit my body at that time, but I have moved away from Ashtanga in terms of my own asana practice. My thinking was, now I'm in my early 30s and I don't want as much athleticism from my yoga. I seek my athleticism with skiing and running and these other things. So I wonder, how have you seen, you're a few decades ahead of me, how have you seen specifically with Ashtanga, does this first series evolve for you, or has it evolved for you?
It's totally evolved. And a couple things. One thing about Mati, right? Mati and I have I have a real heart connection with her, because when she first started doing Ashtanga, she was just a radical fundamentalist. This is the way it is, and take your toes, and, it was exactly. And she has so softened and become so wide, and she talks about it. And she talks about when she first started, and she's a wonderful teacher, and I have such a strong heart connection with her, because I wasn't quite as radical as she was. When I first started teaching, I was working with athletes. I was the wellness director of the New York Roadrunners Club for 20 years, and you work with 50 runners in a class and nobody can touch their toes.
Right.
And they start to bend over and they're all rounding their backs, and you're going, oh my God, this isn't good. So I learned very quickly how to start modifying the postures and varying the postures and making them accessible to tight athletes. Because I felt that the Ashtanga practice, which I ended up calling power yoga, that name came to me in a meditation in the late 70s, and it got me kicked out of the Ashtanga church, which was, at the time was a little painful, but in the long run, it was a good thing. It taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet, and
maybe you are more radical than you think.
Maybe so. Yeah. So I really learned how to adapt. I was teaching really adaptive yoga, because I was working with athletes, and I went, you can't dumb this down so it's soft. I mean, what was so great about the Ashtanga practice, the reason I called it power yoga was, one, I thought, first of all, this is a word that, Western mind can relate to. Second of all, I want people to know that yoga can be athletic. The asana practice can be a workout, that you're supposed to sweat when you practice. You turn on the Agni. It's for purification and detox. And up until that point, as you probably know, and your mom certainly knows, Judith, that in the 70s, yoga was very soft. You did a little stretch, and then you lay down and rest for 10 minutes, and then you did another little stretch, and you lay down and rest. And when I first saw the Ashtanga practice with my teacher, Norman Allen, it just blew my mind. I went, oh my God, this is awesome. This is awesome. So I was really, like you, just captivated by the athleticism and the power of the practice, which is why I came up with this, this idea of hard and soft, that it's sthira sukha, it's steady and focused and hard, and it's soft and relaxing. So because every single book I've written, from Power Yoga, which was all about the primary series, to Beyond Power Yoga, which was the whole 8-limb path, and much more about the philosophy. Boomer Yoga, which took postures from both sequences and combined them and gave options and alternatives and variations. And on my last book, Yoga for Warriors, which I wrote for veterans and military people to help them transition, make that very difficult transition from deployment to civilian life, and specifically help people with anxiety and post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury and physical injuries that require adaptive yoga practices. So I'm so used to modifying, and modifying doesn't necessarily mean making it less strenuous or less challenging. I still think that balance between developing strength, that keen focus, and relaxing, that balance in the muscles and in the energy field is really important. So I still do first series, second series. I leave out extreme flexion, like postures like Tadasana, which is the firefly pose where your feet are up over your shoulders, which is the flexion is too extreme for hip replacements. I think I'm doing probably in the top 1% of what people can regain after hip replacements, particularly for my age. So my orthopedist, whether I'm doing Bakasana or doing Marishasana A, they'll look at me and go, oh my God. But I came back very incrementally, even though I recovered at the speed of light. I really worked back into the asana practice very progressively and mindfully. So you're faced with change whether you like it or not. And the yogis and the Buddhists tell us, the source of our suffering is thinking that which is impermanent is permanent.
Exactly. Tell me more about Yoga for Warriors. How did you get connected? Do you have a veteran in your life, in your family, or?
I don't. In 2007, one of my students and I founded the Give Back Yoga Foundation. We both had this desire. He wanted to give back to his teachers. I was his yoga teacher. I wanted to start a foundation. And so we came up with this idea. I'd been requiring graduates of my school in teacher training to develop a give back project in their communities. And I wanted people to know that the word yoga wasn't synonymous with asana, that there were lots of ways to practice yoga, and that your project could be walking dogs at your local shelter, it could be gathering produce from the local supermarket, taking it to the senior citizen centers, it could be teaching asana, it could be teaching meditation at the senior citizen center. So everyone who graduated from my school had developed a give back project. And so that terminology was kind of in my head. And I said, Rob, let's just call it Give Back Yoga Foundation. He had worked for the World Bank, is just a brilliant business person. He has a doctorate in economics, and he has just taken the Give Back Yoga Foundation into the stratosphere. We have collaborative partnerships now with Gayam and Yoga Journal and Sounds True, and one of our first projects was sponsoring the Prison Yoga Project and providing a lot of mats and paying for publication of James Fox's book, which he wrote for students at San Quentin. And so one of my students started her give back project, had been to work with veterans. And this was going back 7 or 8 years, and she just stumbled into it. She had no idea how to, approach it. But it was her idea, and she started the Mindful Yoga Therapy for Veterans Project. And so between the Prison Yoga Project and what Suzanne was doing, I started thinking, we should write a book. We should take this Prison Yoga Project book and make it available for veterans. We'll just cross out the word prisoner and put in the word veteran. And we tried that, and I looked at it and went, this isn't going to work. So we scrapped the whole thing, and I went, I'm just going to write the book from scratch. And so now I'm on an active campaign with corporations and individuals to raise enough money to buy. We're trying to raise $100,000 to be able to make these books available to any veteran who wants them. We've distributed them to VA centers. There are so many nonprofits that are offering yoga for veterans. And part of the trick is, there are a lot of studios around the country that are offering free classes for veterans. The trick is to get them into the classes, to get them receptive.
So tell us, if people are interested, if people are watching this and they want to give or get involved, where can they go?
GiveBackYoga.org.
Okay.
GiveBackYoga.org has all the programs we're doing. It has information on my book. You can also go to BerylBenderBirch.com. My book is available. For every book we sell, we give one away. We've given a lot more away than we've sold. But the book is really starting to take off. Sounds True is the publisher, and the Give Back Foundation and Sounds True sort of had this collaborative venture to get this book published, and so that's they're certainly working to promote the book. So now that Yoga Journal and Sounds True are both in Boulder, and it gives me lots of excuses to go to Colorado from the East Coast and visit my buddies there.
Well, it's a wonderful sadhana, Beryl. I really have enjoyed this time with you. It's just such a joy to be sort of in your presence, albeit digitally. But I can feel the years of practice, both asana and meditation and your bhakti yoga and all of your service work. It's really a joy to spend time with you.
Thank God, man. He's giving me goosebumps all over. Let's hope that there's, some small, tiny facet of wisdom that we gain from practice. I think the most important thing about our practice, it used to be that the paths of social activism and our spiritual inquiry were very divergent. The yogis sort of sequestered themselves from the world, and I don't think we have the luxury to do that anymore. I find these two paths converging, and that we really have an obligation when we practice and we wake up to go out into the world, not to proselytize or be obnoxious, but to help wake the world up. There's so much work to be done for the animals, for the water, for the air, for our beloved planet Earth, for the children, for one another. So I'm trying in a small way to do my part and inspire people to go out there and recycle and get those orcas out of SeaWorld.
I knew it. You are a radical. It's not just Monty. Well, Beryl, thank you so much. I'm sending you a big namaste.
Big namaste to you. Good luck with open source. This is a wonderful, wonderful service, and I wish you all the best. I'm going to keep an eye out for future programs.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Bye.
Bye.